Most anglers just mix powder into dough and call it done. But there's a technique borrowed directly from molecular gastronomy and industrial candy making that almost nobody in the fishing world talks about, and it changes everything. It's called sugar microcrystallization. And when applied to dough baits, it builds a crystal shell that actually crunches when a fish bites it. We're building this specifically for channel catfish, Ictalurus punctatus, though the science applies across the catfish family. Start with why this matters at all. A catfish has more than 175,000 taste buds covering its entire body. Not just its mouth, its fins, its tail, its barbels, what most people call whiskers. Every square inch of a catfish is essentially a tongue. As angler and writer Keith "Catfish" Sutton once put it, if you were a catfish, you could taste pizza just by sitting on it. These fish can smell certain compounds at concentrations of 1 part per 10 billion parts of water. Their sensory world is almost incomprehensible to us. But taste and smell aren't the only senses driving a strike. Every fish carries a lateral line, a system of specialized sensory organs called neuromast receptors running along its body that detects movement, vibration, and pressure changes in surrounding water. The lateral line picks up low-frequency vibrations in the range of 0 to 200 Hz, letting fish sense nearby movement, navigate currents, and detect prey in complete darkness. Research on mottled sculpin showed these fish could be trained to orient toward and strike a small vibrating bead that mimicked the hydrodynamic signature of their natural prey. And they did it even when blinded. The final strike, the true commitment to eat something, runs largely through that lateral line system and those neuromast receptors. So when your bait hits the water and a fish closes in, it's reading that bait with multiple sensory systems running simultaneously. Scent pulls them in from a distance. Taste confirms the chemical profile. But texture, the actual physical properties of the food, determines whether it gets accepted or rejected. A soft dough ball might get mouthed and spit. A dough ball with a crystalline shell that fractures on contact, sending a burst of micro-vibrations through the water at the exact moment of the bite, that's a trigger. That tells the lateral line this object is breaking apart like real food. Like a crayfish exoskeleton, like a seed husk, like something worth swallowing. Compare this to stink bait, which delivers scent but no structural trigger. No shell to fracture, nothing to activate that lateral line response on contact. Quick thing, if you're finding this useful, drop a like. It helps this video reach more people, and it only takes a second. Here's how to actually build that crystal shell. The science comes straight from candy making. When you dissolve sugar in hot water, you push the solution past its normal saturation point. Nucleation is the key mechanism here. At room temperature, water holds only so much dissolved sugar. But heat it, and it accepts far more. Keep adding sugar until nothing more will dissolve. And you've created what chemists call a supersaturated solution. The American Chemical Society uses this exact principle to teach crystallization in high school chemistry. It's the same science behind rock candy, behind the crisp top of a creme brulee, behind industrial microcrystalline sugar production. Once that supersaturated solution begins to cool, it turns unstable. It holds more dissolved sugar than it can sustain, and the excess desperately wants to come out of solution. Any surface, any imperfection, any seed crystal becomes a nucleation site, where new crystals begin forming. Drop a rough textured dough ball into that cooling solution, and the bait surface becomes a crystallization surface. Sugar molecules organize themselves into solid structures directly on the bait. In industrial sugar manufacturing, crystal size gets controlled by adjusting cooling rate and agitation. Rapid cooling produces smaller crystals, slow cooling produces larger ones, and stirring prevents any single crystal from growing too large. For bait purposes, you want microcrystals, particles no greater than 50 micrometers, because they create a thin, even shell rather than chunky sugar rocks. The patents on microcrystalline sugar production specify seed crystals between 5 and 20 micrometers, with supersaturation values between 1.1 and 1.3 for optimal results. Now for the practical method. Start with your base dough using 1 cup of cornmeal, 1 cup of flour, and 2 tablespoons of sugar mixed with enough water to form a heavy dough. Roll it into balls about the size of a nickel. Bring water and caro syrup to a boil, drop in the dough balls, and boil for 2 to 3 minutes. This pre-cooks them and produces a firm base that won't dissolve the moment it hits the water. When it comes to rigging, a size 2 or size 4 treble hook works best here, threading through the center so the crystal shell stays intact around the hook shank. Circle hooks are the cleaner choice if you're fishing catch and release for blue catfish or flathead catfish, both of which will hit this bait as readily as channel cats. Then build your super saturated dip. Heat 2 cups of water and begin dissolving sugar into it, stirring constantly until no more will absorb. You're targeting roughly a 2-to-1 sugar to water ratio by weight. While the solution is still hot, stir in 2 packets of drink mix. Cherry is the proven favorite among catfish anglers, and for good reason. The drink mix pulls double duty, providing an intense scent trail that catfish can detect from remarkable distances, and contributing citric acid, which slightly modifies crystallization behavior and promotes finer crystal formation. Let the solution cool to around 140 degrees Fahrenheit, not room temperature, not boiling. That intermediate zone where supersaturation is established but crystallization hasn't fully kicked in. Submerge your pre-cooked dough balls and leave them as the solution continues cooling around them. In industrial crystallization, that initial white haze of crystal formation appears after about 10 minutes. Leave your bait submerged as the solution cools completely, ideally overnight. The longer the soak, the more complete the crystal shell, and the deeper the scent infusion penetrates the dough. When you pull them out, air dry the baits on a wire rack for at least an hour. What you'll have is a dough ball with a thin, crunchy crystalline shell loaded with scent. The exterior has genuine texture, not just a sticky coating, actual structure. Some carp anglers in the UK have been doing something conceptually similar with boilies for years, coating them in successive layers of liquid attractant and powder to build a crust. Companies like Corda Tackle and CC Moore sell products designed for exactly this kind of layered coating. But they're building soft crusts from powdered attractants. They're not engineering a crystalline shell using supersaturation science. And that distinction matters. Crystals fracture. Powder just mushes. A crystalline shell versus a powder coating isn't a minor difference in degree. It's a difference in the entire physical mechanism that triggers the lateral line. You can push this further. On a second dip, add fresh drink mix to the solution before reheating and resaturating. Each cycle builds another crystalline layer, and 3 cycles produces a shell that audibly crunches when you press it between your fingers. Think about what that means underwater. A fish approaches, drawn by the scent plume dissolving off the outer crystal layer. It mouths the bait. The crystal shell fractures, sending a burst of micro-vibrations through the water column. Vibrations that register on the neuromast receptors of every fish nearby. The soft dough interior, meanwhile, feels natural, pliable, easy to swallow. You've engineered a bait that triggers every sensory system a fish uses to make feeding decisions. Smell, taste, touch, and that lateral line sixth sense that tells a fish, this is food worth committing to. Nicholas Corti and Hervé. This coined the term molecular gastronomy back in 1988 to describe the scientific study of cooking processes. They never imagined their framework would end up at the end of a fishing line, but the science doesn't care about intention. Supersaturation is supersaturation whether you're making rock candy for a county fair or building a crystal-shelled catfish bait in your garage. The next time someone asks why you're boiling sugar water at midnight, tell them you're doing molecular gastronomy. Because you are.